pleased to be in this sacred place in this hour and to greet you, greet Memphis Theological School, the Cumberland Presbyterian Church, with which I have felt close for the last 59, 60 years because I married a Cumberland Presbyterian. Second Cumberland Presbyterian Church. And came to admire any number of people in the Cumberland tradition, especially Dorothy's father, who was clerk for his presbytery, and who was a solid liver of the gospel as a lay person, and just a terrific human being. So it's a special meaning to my life to be here with the Memphis Theological School. I had friends at the seminary over the years and friends in the denomination, many of whom have already gone before me. But I count Second Presbyterian, I count rather Cumberland Presbyterian as a part of the kingdom of God and a great company, a family of faith. So it's a delight and joy for me to be here on this opportunity. I want to thank President Brown and others who have arranged to have this, especially my friend Mark, who has been one of my handlers when I come to Memphis, and so very, very gracious in being a part of my family, faith family, and all the rest of it. Now, President Brown said that this was not going to be a chapel service, and I had been putting and wrapping my head around a theme and all, but since this is the case, I'm not going to leave my theme that I was working on. And so I'm going to put everything that I say now around the theme of following Jesus today, if you don't mind, because that was the great call that I heard before I heard it, before I could hear, that seemed to me the voice of eternity, the voice of God, but also in time I recognized it was also my voice. So following Jesus today. I'm going to be informed, though I'm not planning to do any exegesis at all. I'm going to be informed by two ancient men by the name of Jesus who lived approximately 180, 200 years apart. The first one, Jesus of Sirach, in the apocryphal section of this Oxford annotated Bible, which I think was one of the early translations into English that I read decades ago. So the two Jesuses are going to inform me. The teacher who is in the Apocrypha, having read the Bible frequently from cover to cover, every book, every word, finishing up another edition now, in fact. Ecclesiasticus, but Sirach, or Jesus of Sirach, was a great teacher. And I want to read to you some words from this 34th chapter, and from the 24th verse. from the 25th verse. If you don't know these verses, I would urge you to know them and study them. The whole book is a wonderful book. First, 34th chapter, 25th, 26th, 27th verses of that chapter. The bread of the needy is the life of the poor. Whoever deprives them of it is a murderer. To take away a neighbor's living is to commit murder. To deprive an employee of wages is to shed blood. And then from Jesus of Nazareth. As Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me. Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. Following Jesus today. I am not a civil rights person. I was called by eternity to be a pastor of people, even before I knew what it was or who it was pushing me around, telling me who I was and where I had to go. My calling was confirmed by the time I reached high school, 1942, and I knew that I would become a pastor of congregations, of people. So I had it easier than many of you students here. I knew very well not only the course I was taking, but I knew full well that I would be in the pulpit, guiding and directing and preaching and teaching and trying to live out the gospel of Jesus. And I did that for some 43 and a half years in Ohio, in Tennessee, then Lawson in California. I spent 3 years as a United Methodist missionary in India as a young man, fresh out of college, fresh out of prison also. And was a campus minister at the Presbyterian school, actually, Bismarck College in Nagpur, India, where I was campus minister and coach. I coached basketball, soccer, tennis, track and field, and helped even the cricket teams to understand the care of their bodies, care of the kind of preparation that would enable them to be fine athletes in cricket. None of that was by my own choice necessarily, but I made it my choice as I sensed the Spirit guiding me that was deeply rooted in my reading and study of the Scriptures, especially the four Gospels. So whatever my path has been, and I take responsibility for my own errors of judgment and errors behavior. But fundamentally, I stand here as a person who has tried to let 8 decades of living be guided by the presence of the eternal, by the presence of wonder and beauty, and especially as focused in the word that emanated from Jesus of Nazareth. My wonderful parents did not raise me to go to jail. My wonderful parents did not raise me to be considered a stranger and an alien and an outsider and a communist and all those kinds of things. Did not raise me at all in that respect. They raised me within the context of the love of God, their own love, the love in our family. And the love I experienced from age 4 in the St. James AME Zion congregation that Dad pastored in Massillon, Ohio. And I couldn't express that at age 4 or age 6, not at age 11. And the words don't quite capture the experience. But for me, life has been pursuit of God's love, God's word, God's purpose. It's made alive in the scriptures in so many different ways, but that's made alive especially in Jesus. So I came to see very early that Jesus of Nazareth was also a nonviolent practitioner. He has a very firm theology and philosophy and wisdom. It's the wisdom of what I've tried to learn as nonviolence. Gandhi of India is the man who coined the term nonviolence around 1906, 1908 in South Africa. And he says in one of his books entitled Nonviolence and War and Peace, that was published in 1942, which I was able to find in India. He writes that I coined the term nonviolence as a translation of the word ahimsa, Indian word out of Jainism, which his mother practiced. Then he writes, nonviolence means love. It's not a negative, as in English, non. But he writes, love in practice. And I want to add, love is power, the power of God. Love is the power of the universe. Love is the gift of God at birth of human life. Love is God's energy creating the heavens and the earth, as Isaiah and others like to write. Gandhi went on to say that this creative force that is nonviolence, that is soul force, is a gift of creation. And part of what Gandhi wanted to do was to help people to understand that there are many temptations to follow other kinds of powers in the world. That the human race had to come back to recognizing the power that created us, the love that formed us, the love that shaped the human family in the image and design of God. That love God called the force more powerful than ether, more powerful than physics. He also insisted if human beings learned to operate out of that power that gave them birth, we humans would be then astonished at the kind of world that we would create. Gandhi I found in Jesus before high school that that's what Jesus meant in the Sermon on the Mount. It's not a dissertation on war, as pacifist history has tried to make it. And it is not, as Reinhold Niebuhr suggests, an interim ethic. It's none of that. It is the Jesus call that we human beings, created in the image of God, are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Of course, if the light in you is darkness, behold, if the light, beware, if the light in you is darkness, how deep is that darkness? Now, if we have eyes to see, we know that this great, deep darkness across Christianity in the whole country. This is not to say that there are wonderful people like yourselves, good and decent people. I found lovers of life in every single congregation I passed. Lovers of God, followers of Jesus, doing it better than I could ever expect to do. So I know that across the earth, of the 2 billion people who call themselves Christians, there are literally millions and millions of ordinary men and women who are devoted. And in their own circle and families, their agenda is not the agenda of the Congress, of the President, of the governors of the United States. Their agenda is not the agenda of capturing the oil and the water of the earth and rationing it for profit. Their agenda is not the agenda of the Bank of Finance, Bank of America, rather. Their agenda is the agenda of God. Their agenda is to live, to nurture their babies and children, to watch them grow into significant, wonderful adults. Their business is to nurture their family. Their business, our business, I should say, to nurture our families, to nurture the neighborhoods where we live, to nurture life around us with love, truth, and compassion, to dismantle the spiritual forces of wickedness. Yes. Because you cannot love God and the neighbors yourself at all if God does not then give you eyes to see the horror of torture of our fellow human beings, to see the horror of people who do not have enough food to eat, of the homeless, of the widow, the children, and the criminal, the sinner. God has not given you hearts to hear or to feel or ears to hear. If you don't recognize all around us forces of spiritual wickedness that we must dismantle. And my life has been, in part, an effort to dismantle the old forces of tyranny and oppression, racism, sexism, in all their forms, all their masks, all their mysteries, all their mythologies. Dismantle the structures of oppression that are racist and sexist. Dismantle the structures of violence, especially, whether in the family. I had quarrels with the peace movements most of my life because, while they put the emphasis on the wars, my emphasis upon the violence I saw ordinary people practicing. So even back in the 60s, when I came to Memphis, a marriage crisis took place, a family crisis took place. A husband and wife came to me. The first questions I asked as I began to unravel the story was to ask if there was a gun in the home, if there was a gun in the home. And, at least 2 occasions in Memphis, I had People said there was a gun, and I asked them to bring it to me, and I gave the gun to the police. You may or may not know the data. Gun in the home means you have a higher percentage of suicide, you have a higher percentage of injury, you have a higher percentage of accidental homicide, babies, children. 8 or 9 children a day handle a gun in their home and kill themselves with it, or kill a sister or brother or a neighbor's child. That's actual fact, and has been for 30 years in the United States. So racism, sexism, then violence. Violence itself is a crime against humanity. Violence of speech that despises some people, violence of the fist, violence of the thought that thinks it's all right to have millions of people in America who work hard every day, some of them doing 2 or 3 jobs, and still have to be on food stamps. That's the reality that I've known all my life. And I've known it's not just black people, but it's a larger number of white people across the land. It is Indian people, it is Asian people, it is Hispanic people, it's Mexican American people. And the political and economic and social and media systems do not see this from almost the beginning of our country. And so I have felt that the gospel of Jesus for the whole person and for all persons, everywhere, not just for some. And in trying to follow Jesus, therefore, my path has led to jail. I decided before I was in high school I would not tolerate racism in any form or shape, racial prejudice. And so I knew that segregation laws, the nation was involved in a great political, cultural movement to become an absolutely segregated nation. And I knew that was wrong and evil. By the time I was in college, I recognized that to follow Jesus meant that I could not cooperate with the Selective Service Act. I did register at age 18. But by the time I was 19 or 20, I recognized that it was a horrible law. It was an unjust law which I could not obey. So I sent my draft cards back. I'm not a conscientious objector. And could have taken that category, could have been a pre-ministerial deferment, could have taken student deferments, but the way in which Jesus seemed to guide and direct me was to send your draft cards back, and I did that in 49-50. And so landed with a 3-year sentence in federal prison as a felon. So I'm a felon of the Lord. An unjust law. By the time I hit high school, I was also convinced that the anti-Roman Catholic things among us Protestants and the anti-Jewishness of stuff in my own high school also were wrong, and so I became a bitter critic of any kind of religious domination and control. Intellectually and spiritually, and in every way that I've known how, I have fought against the notion that Western civilization is the first civilization on earth. When that axiom was formed, most of the people of Europe didn't even know about Africa or Confucius. Knew nothing about South America. So it was an axiom that developed out of a sense of domination and wealth seeking in the world. I do not find it anywhere in the scriptures any of the major figures and voices, poets, theologians, pretend that God is only the God of this people, no other people. So I think I'm going to try to wrap this up quickly. I'm going to, my own effort has been to follow Jesus. Still, major prayer, a major theme in my own life. It also means two or three things for me. It means the study of the Scriptures. Because the four Gospels are the four probably best books that we have about Jesus. So I think if I were to start over again, I might seek a PhD on the Gospels of Jesus only. That's how engaged I am in that study across the years. Study of the Scriptures. I went to a preacher's meeting in Los Angeles a decade ago, probably now, maybe more. Yes, it had to be a decade. I retired in 1999. This is 2015. So it had to be more than a decade. But I went to a preacher's meeting, and someone who was warming us up for the gathering, and we all sat at tables, around tables for small discussions, and the convener asked the question, how many of us have read the Bible from cover to cover? And I was stunned when only about 4 or 5 of us in that group of pastors, clergy, raised their hand and said we had read the Bible cover to cover. And there's no way to follow Jesus unless we can gain all the insight and wisdom and knowledge we can about Jesus. Jesus was a nonviolent practitioner. Chapter 4 of Luke, for example, where Jesus escapes the angry people in his hometown who want to throw him off the precipice. Well, in the nonviolent movements in the United States, we've had people who've walked through mobs without harm. In my study of nonviolence, I came across John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, who was mobbed at least 5 times or 6 times in his life, and writes about it in his journal, and walked through every mob that grabbed him in different parts of England in his preaching and work, and walked through without harm. And at least 2 occasions, the leadership of the mob turned against the mob and said, "We'll do no harm to this man," and escorted him safely through the crowd to his destination. So that's what happened in the 4th chapter of Luke. Jesus went on his way, is the way the text reads. Well, I realized from my study of nonviolence and all across many years now that he went on his way. However he did it, we can only imagine. We can imagine and should imagine. But there is a power of eternity in his life and in his walk and in his heart and in his posture, so that he walked through the crowds that were angry without fear, and not a hair of his head was harmed on that occasion. That's what nonviolence is. Well, we need to see Jesus as a nonviolent athlete. The dogmas may be all well and good, they may be all true. Christianity is preaching too much dogma and belief system and too little about this man who walked in the 1st century and taught and healed and lifted and bent his energy to walking all over his known territory, trying to express the will of God and the kingdom of God on earth. So the gospel is political. I'll say that. It's the politics of Jesus, the politics of God. We in the churches must come to understand what that represents. So do good work on the scriptures. Read it thoroughly. Connect the dots. See the continuations of the message of truth and power. Don't avoid that necessary study of the scriptures. Do not go to the scriptures only to do the sermon. Go to the scriptures in order to discover in part, always only in part, always only, probably always with error, to discover the heart and mind and soul and spirit of eternity. So that's one of the guides I give. The second kind of guide I give is this, that to follow Jesus means that whoever we are, wherever we are in life, and whatever we think we are, we need to try with every person we meet, in our family, out of our family, to see people as the children of God, the children of life, the salt of the earth, the light of the world, not primarily as sinners past original sin passing through sexuality, but as in the first chapter of Genesis, a living soul. In the second chapter, in the image and mind of God. And absolutely refuse to meet any person or to be in the midst of any people, to be anywhere in the world, to be anywhere in the United States, and have any kind of sensibility of despising of other people. Nothing is so poisonous as the spiritual poison of hate and despising some people. We in the churches ought to be leading our nation in lifting a new culture in which every boy and every girl is welcome as gift of God, gift of life, gift of love. We must dismantle the structures that prevent that. And I'm going to say something else here that I don't know if I've said publicly before, but I think the nation needs to adopt a black agenda. The agenda of my great-great-grandparents who were slaves in the United States. My great-grandfather escaped as a very young man, went up in the Underground Railroad in Canada with his small son, he himself was quite a young person, and with a small son, and hammered out a farm in the Queens Bush area of Ontario, around Allentown and Guelph, where I visited from time to time. The slave sang songs and sang music and composed music because the master and the overseers wanted to know where the slave was on the plantation. Frederick Douglass is the source of this in his memoir. He says that we were ordered and forced to sing wherever we were on the plantation all the time. So they composed the music that we call now the Negro spiritual. But know that in that Negro spiritual, they insisted we are the children of God, again and again in the songs. We are the children of God. This is the music that produced Go Down Moses, Oh Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. A whole range of music that was fight music. But because it was music and because the poetry was disguised and masked, slave owners didn't understand what they were singing. Steal Away to Jesus. I found that in my reading in 3 different sections of United States, in Georgia, in Virginia, in South Carolina, around the 1820s, 1830s. And it was not a song of piety. It was a signal song. Steal away to Jesus meant go into the forest, a place where we can worship and talk together. Sometimes those meetings were about the fact that Harriet Tubman was going to be in the area. That there was a possibility of going north, escaping it. So that music in Christian faith, religious experience, is the music of resistance. And there is no word of hatred in any of that music. And I've counted in one book, I counted a list of 8,000 remnants of the poetry of the Negro spiritual. Don't have the music. We don't have all the poetry, all the verse. And you will not find any word about despising someone else in that music. That's why I happen to think that the church should, as a whole, especially black people, recover the Negro spiritual, use it and reuse it as a major form of music in our worship. Every week there can be a spiritual, because there are so many of them. Many have now been put in composition in ways that are wonderful to study. Some have been composed in the classical style, symphony orchestras, for example. Just astonishing sound. But in any case, study the Word, study the Scripture. The whole Bible is not the Word of God. There are places where it's wrong. I'm right now ending the book of Numbers in the new edition of the Bible. The book of Numbers, moving into Deuteronomy. There are places where it's wrong. There are places where different eyesight has seen different things, different hearts have felt different words. There's imagination there. But study the Word, Scriptures, and then refuse to despise any person. Refuse our culture. I mean, I remember growing up being told, you are a part of the Allies. You love, therefore, the British and the French and the Russians. And you should detest the Italians and the Japanese and the Germans. Well, I said by the end of college, I'm not listening to any governments in America that tells me who I should hate. I'm not going to change my enemies because of a political, economic issue. I'm going to love all. Refuse to despise anyone in your community, especially, but anywhere in the world. And then the final thing I'd like to simply say, be prepared to take risks. I have a hard time being 89 because I didn't expect to live this long. I was in jail at 20, and in maximum custody cell house in Kentucky, federal prison. So I did not expect to reach 40. My friend Martin, of course, was killed, assassinated here. So I find it hard to believe that I'm alive. I still have something to do and something to work. But in any case, be prepared to risk your life in being obedient. There is no obedience in despising some people in the world. That isn't obedience to God. That's disobedience. Has nothing to do. There are no people in the world who are illegal in the sight of God. There are no people in the world who are undocumented. They have the documentation of creation. It is the Lord of the heavens and the earth who did the creating. So human beings have to try to catch up with God. Be prepared to take risks to love. To follow Jesus is to discover many days and moments on the journey where one does not have fear or anxiety, does not worry about tomorrow. I know what fear is. I've had it. Major experiences in Memphis, Birmingham, elsewhere. So I know fear, but on the other side of the coin, the Spirit of the Lord has been upon me again and again and again. And I walked into the torture plant in Mississippi jail and said to other freedom riders, look, let's turn the jail into a worship center. Let's turn the jail into a learning center where we try to understand one another and learn where we are, what this scene is that we're engaged in, and how we can move by the grace of God to the next step, to the next transformation of life. I would say to you, especially you who are students and pastors, that to follow Jesus is the central command of the Jesus movement in the Scriptures. To know Him, to sense that we live in the presence of eternity, to recognize that life is a massive, wondrous gift, and to lead that kind of life to the best of our ability, to the full capacity. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The scribe who asked Jesus the question, what is the first commandment? Jesus was responding to him, and Jesus said, there is no other commandment greater than these. There is no other commandment. The man responded, Jesus, Rabbi, teacher, you speak truly and rightly. The Lord is one. To love the Lord our God with all our heart and understanding, and our neighbor as ourselves, is more important than all burnt offerings and sacrifices. As Jesus said, you are not far from the kingdom. That's a great place to be in the journey. Not far from the kingdom, but striving, nevertheless.